for opening remarks. And we also had the respective presentations from the implementing partners as well. Overall, the feedback was that regardless of the challenges that are related with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was great success achieved in terms of implementation of this project. And that was a credit to each one of them. Thank you so much. Yesterday we had also a bonding session. We bonded through various activities that were very amazing. They put us into the mode of how we started yesterday. Yesterday, we also had highlights of the achievements of the WIPS project. And we heard from the implementing teams as well as from the beneficiaries. They gave us a lot of feedback, testimonies on how much they have achieved through the project. Some of the highlights of the feedback was that there was attitude change or behavior change. There was also change in perception of how women looked at themselves, and they have started already taking up leadership positions in the public sector. Much was heard from Luwero. It was an amazing feedback, and other partners as well. And also the beneficiaries that were under the various partnerships. They gave us very good feedback. Then we also heard from them on the emerging issues. The women had to speak out during the interactions. When we were implementing, they shared their experiences, and there were a lot of revelation around the persistence of issues that limit women taking up leadership positions in the public sector. There was also a call that the project, the Women in Public Sector project, shouldn't be a one-off. There is need for its continuity to address the issues that hinder women in taking up leadership positions at all levels. Then there was also the issue of lack of mentorship and support, which is urgently required if women are to be supported to overcome and they take up leadership. And several others were highlighted as emerging issues and achievements. Then also yesterday, through the feedback, we had recommendations from the participants that attended with us yesterday. So somehow it was said that there should be inclusive interventions under WIPS where the various categories of women should be given specific attention on their needs in taking up leadership. This brought in the issue of special needs and other categories of women like nuns. They are also women, or women that are in religious service and other circles needed to be part of this project. Also, what came out yesterday was the issue of male champions. They need to be opted because women cannot make it alone. They need the support of the men around them in order to appreciate their limitations and they take up leadership. What came out yesterday also was the need for mainstreaming gender and equity across programming in the public sector and also in the other areas, even in the private sector. There is need for paying special attention to the gender and equity needs if women are to continually grow in career. Women should also become proactive in taking up opportunities, because from the emerging issues, we realized that women were selective in taking up opportunities, and this was keeping them behind in terms of leadership. Then yesterday we had also a session on reflection for the future. Here what was said was that we need to focus on the next steps of where should we take the Women in Public Sector project through maybe resource mobilization and other things that need to be put together so that this project is implemented further. We also had a session on measurement and learning. The team there highlighted a lot of feedback for this program. There were several of them. We also heard from the donor team, and the donor team also shared their experiences during the implementation period, the lessons learned and what was amazing for them. And they also expressed so much joy to where the project is now. We also had an insight in the next steps. What do we need to do if the project is to move further? And finally, we had the closing remarks by the EOC chairperson, and she had insights into what it has been for the journey in promoting and protecting women in the public sector, as well as the efforts that are needed further to support women, so that together we fight marginalization and discrimination against them, for them to be able to take up leadership, but also deliver in the spaces that has formerly been dominated by the male counterparts. I think if I've not left out anything that was very important, those are the basic things that we looked at yesterday. And I want to say yesterday was very, very fruitful and rewarding to all of us. We look forward to what it is going to be today. We are very, very expectant, and we want to forge a way forward in as far as women in the public sector project is concerned. Thank you so much for this opportunity to take you through these insights that happened yesterday. Thank you so much. I hand over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Petra. I had asked Solomon to actually assist me with this session, and sorry we had some technical hitches here, but they have been resolved. And I kindly request Solomon to proceed and make comments, because I didn't actually listen in to Petra's submission.
Thank you very much. Morning to us all, and it's our hope that we are doing well this morning and we are still thriving. I'm supposed to handhold until Elizabeth settles in. In terms of our agenda, Petro was giving us a recap of the day. So we're going now to move to the next item of the agenda, which is reviewing our theory of change, that Ramadan is going to take us through, so that we are all on the same page before we get into the other sections of the agenda. Rama, are you ready for us? Rama, are you on the call?
Yes, Solomon.
Okay, so I hand over to you to take us through. And what we are going to do in this session is to really look at the learning questions, but also the theory of change, the domains that inform the project, and also that will be informing the bigger program moving forward for us to get to speed to where we were, where are we, but also where we need to be going. Rama, you are welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am called Ramadan Muwereza.
Can we see you, Ramadan? Some people do not know you on the call. Some people are on this call for the first time. They were not here with us yesterday. Okay.
Okay, I'm called Ramadan Muwereza from the Uganda Women's Network. I'm going to present on the theory of change for the WIPS project. Okay, is everyone hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you, Rama.
Okay, fine.
Yes,
thank
we can
you.
hear.
After the introduction, I'm just giving a brief about the WIPS project by starting with mentioning the goal, especially for those ones who are not with us yesterday. The WIPS goal is women in the public sector championing public policy making and implementation processes for the transformation of all women lives in Uganda. This is implemented by a consortium of organizations, that's FEMFORT, EOC, FORDE, and UONET, with support from the Robert Bosch think tank, and we covered sectors such as the Service Commission sector, Ministry of Public Service, health sector, education sector, JAILOS, the security sector, local government, Ministry of Gender, among others. Getting to the gist of the day, I'm supposed to talk about the theory of change. For the gist of my session, the WIP's theory of change is premised on the understanding that for women in the public sector to excel, effectively participate in and benefit from the public policy-making processes, they must be supported to holistically address the structural, institutional, technical, and personal barriers. To be able to do this, we must invest in changing policy barriers, holding leaders accountable for the existing gender equality and women's empowerment interventions, strengthening capacities of women in the public sector at national and subnational levels, and creating sustainable social movements on women in the public sector. So for that, therefore, if partners, the four partners, the women in the public sector, the sector that I talked about, remain committed to the goals and agreed action the next years, apply the available resources appropriately, engage in deep reflection and learning by tracking, documenting, and sharing the milestone, and ensuring that actions undertaken influence positive changes in structure, policy, behavior, and practice regarding women in the public sector, and those of key government ministries, departments, and agencies, policymakers, and leaders. Then, gender-responsive public policy-making processes and outcomes, incidences of low numbers and levels of engagement, absence of specific women targets and quotas rather, gender-neutral recruitment and staff retention procedure, and weak intergenerational linkages will reduce, and the advancement of women leadership in Uganda's public sector, as well as gender-responsive policies, shall be achieved in the long run. So that's our theory of change. And in terms of reach for the pilot project, we have been able to reach about 400 duty bearers and 90 university students. Our theory of change is to be through 3 main domains. And in that regard, today I'm going to give a progress on what we can see on each of the three domains, and what we are yet to see. This is in line with what we developed at the start of this project, what we aimed at achieving in the short run or in the 1-year pilot project. So the first domain of change is duty bearers implement and enforce laws and policies that advance women's rights. And from that, so far what we can see is that there's been gender awareness among duty bearers, such as the District Service Commission. The other that we can see is that capacities of women in the public sector strengthened to proper implementation of laws and policies. And then still duty bearers are also aware of the existence of laws and policies that promote gender equality in public sector. What we are yet to see so far in the pilot project in regards to this domain is the increased resource allocation for the implementation of laws, the improved ability of citizens to hold duty bearers accountable for the enforcement of laws and policies, the enhanced knowledge of citizens on women's laws and policies, strategic allies from to demand for increased resource allocation. So in regards to that domain, that's what we can't see yet, and we would wish to see in case there is an opportunity of having another phase of the WIPS project. Moving on to the next domain, it is women's leadership within the public sector is increased and a vibrant movement is built. That's one of what really, that's one of the key areas that we targeted and we thought we could achieve. But so far what we can see is solidarity strengthened amongst the women in the public sector. For the sectors where we have worked, solidarity has been strengthened.
Of cold is coming. Mugero.
Members, can you please mute all our microphones? Admin, host, please help us mute. Ramadan, please proceed.
Okay. Appointment of several women to senior positions, such as the Vice President, Prime Minister, First Deputy Prime Minister, and also in some other sectors where we have worked, with the District Service Commission, we have seen some appointments of women in different positions. Then still, we have still strengthened the capacity of women leaders in the public sector. In regards to that domain, what we are yet to see for this one, we have just seen it partially, is the solidarity strengthened among women in the public sector and other sectors. So we in this domain, we had intended that we need to see women in the public sector working together with women in the other sectors, especially the private sector, but that hasn't yet come out. Then the review of public sector guidelines and policies to ensure that they are gender responsive, it hasn't yet been seen. The communication strategy developed and agreed upon within the public sector, it hasn't yet been also seen. And after that, we are moving on to domain 3 as the last one, which is around women have space that is free from gender inequalities and allows them have their voice heard in the public policy formulation and implementation. So far, from the time the project started, we have realized a reduction in sexual harassment in the public sector. It could be there, but this time around, it's not so much into the media, so we see a reduction. Then still, some levels we have seen appropriate action taken on the perpetrators in the districts where we work. Then some men and women in the public sector challenge sexism and inequalities to some extent. What we are yet to see is an inclusive and vibrant public sector, women's movement built and supported in Uganda, adequate safe spaces to nurture solidarity and sisterhood, culture of women as sex objects changed to one of respect and dignity, authorities respect the dignity and value of women and respect their voice in the public sector. So, in terms of progress, that's what we can see, and that's not what we are yet to see. All this we had planned with assumption that by maybe the end of the pilot project, we shall be able to realize a number of these results. But I think for some reasons, we were overambitious and we haven't realized everything. And then on the other note, a number of duty bearers or people that we have worked with, they haven't really fully utilized their knowledge for some reasons, such as that the effect of the COVID, which really hampered the smooth running of the project and in the knowledge application. And then on the other note, we also noticed, as it was mentioned yesterday, that the public sector is a green area when it comes to gender equality and advocacy. So they still need more time for us to ensure that we realize all the results that we had planned to achieve. Thank you. So do I still have some more time to proceed to the next one? Because I see my time is out.
How much time would you need?
There are questions I don't know whether we can ask them along as time goes on during the discussion, the learning questions.
You can proceed for a few minutes so that we finalize that, because we have to, the conversations we're going to have afterwards would require us to have gotten that.
Okay, thank you. Then just give me a few minutes to share it.
And members, if you've arrived, please introduce yourselves in the chat if you've not done so, so that we know who is on the call. Your name, your institution, organization, so that we know who is on the call and your position in that organization.
Okay, thank you. At the start of this project, we came up with 10 questions that we are supposed to answer. And they are in line with the assumptions that we made and the results that we intended to achieve. In the 1 year of the pilot phase, the first question was, or is, what perspectives do women in the public sector bring into leadership? The second one, what stifles women leadership growth and development within the public sector? Do women face gender-specific challenges within the public sector? We shall be getting the answers later. The third one is, do women leaders in the public sector pay any special attention to gender issues? Do we need male champions to achieve our goals? Does the creation of safe spaces for peer learning and solidarity building boost women's active engagement within the public sector? Question 6 is lack of support for the advancement of women's rights by women in the public sector due to lack of knowledge? How will the involvement of the consortium members contribute to the achievement of the set objectives? Question 8 is, will our interventions enable us to contribute to the achievement of the overall change? Question 9, how can we mitigate the risks surrounding the assumptions we made in the pilot project? And finally, what are the best practices that the 4 WIPs implementing partners can learn from each other from the previous work of advancing women's rights? CSOs learning from the Equal Opportunities Commission, which is a public institution, and the Equal Opportunities Commission learning from the CSOs comprising of FEMFORT, FORD, and UONET. In total, those are the 10 guiding questions for the pilot project. We may not be able to answer them now, but as we go, the discussion will be revolving around these questions. Thank you, Salome.
Thank you very much, Ramadan. I'll now take the opportunity to hand back over to Elizabeth, because I'm presenting the next session, but also in this country, we need to learn the culture of peaceful handover of power. So Elizabeth, back to you as the overall facilitator, and then we proceed.
Thank you very much, Salome, for holding forth, and thank you, Rama, for that wonderful presentation. I think we note from Rama's presentation that we gave ourselves quite an ambitious task at the beginning of this project, but we also must realize that we're designing a 5-year program. So that was left unachieved after the 5-year is actually what feeds into the 5-year program. And it is the reason why development partners have been invited to this meeting, so that we share with you the remaining part of the unachieved tasks, and we see how together we can work towards their achievement. So The learning questions that have been put across by Ramadan are just to tickle our thinking around what needs to happen. How can we infuse the lessons drawn from the other partners? What is it we can do jointly to achieve where we want to go? So without further ado, I'm going to invite Solomon to give us a bit of feedback. And like Liberty mentioned in the beginning, please, if you have a comment,
Salome, I think we've lost.
I think we've lost Elizabeth. But what I'm supposed to do, you know, the internet on Friday in this town is very, very complex. I do not know why. We need a commission of investigation or inquiry. Why internet is very poor on Friday in Uganda. And with an underground, probably they switch us off on Fridays and Mondays, but it's really generally a problem. So we'll try to get Elizabeth back on board, but that doesn't stop us from proceeding. According to the program, I and Miriam from the Robert Bosch Stiftung are supposed to give feedback to you as partners in terms of the program management, because we're here both to learn, at the same time to reposition ourselves for the main program, which is 5 years and very exciting, as indicated by the previous speaker. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because I thought this should be a conversation in terms of our views. And I and Miriam and Yasmina were the team in Robert Bosch Stiftung that were supporting you on the program management side. And I'm happy to share this on our behalf, and then Miriam will come in, because we started the journey in 2018 with you, with the assessment, which assessment was really looking at the wider aspect of public policy making. And it's from that we zeroed on the area around women in the public sector as the only area that we feel not many people are working, but also it's very strategic to work on. So in terms of program design, our feedback was that the program was based on evidence that was gathered. The program was not just crafted somewhere. We had a whole year of a country assessment, of mapping who the actors are, what are they supporting, who is funding what is being funded and what is not being funded. And what was very clear is that a lot of funding is going towards women in political space, training women councillors, training women MPs, engaging with parliament, engaging with various spaces in the legislature. A lot of resourcing is going towards women in the public, private sector, especially the small businesses and not the big businesses. And a lot of work is going around women's movement building in the women's movement, but none was going towards women civil servants and women in the public sector, or unearthing the gender specific issues that are in the public sector. And so in terms of program design, the WIPS program was based on evidence, which was gathered, which informed the partners to address the unique challenges that were found out in the assessment. Some of these were around the structure of the public sector, where it is most of the high positions are occupied by males compared to females. We have very many females at the entry level, but also many of these drop out at some point in time because of failure to balance gender roles as parents, but also as young people. There's endemic sexual harassment and sexual violence, but also there's no kind of sisterhood, solidarity, holding each other, because to survive in the sector, you had to become the men you've displaced. That's what actually one of the quotes that came out from the evidence. But also EOC had done a research previously, which was actually showing how paltry the leadership of women is in the public sector, where we have very few women at the top and very many women at the bottom. But also there are some sectors that actually don't even meet the minimum requirements of gender equity as laid out in our constitution of at least a minimum of 30%. And so in terms of program design, another key feedback was that there was a co-creation process after we got the report. We sat somewhere in Entebbe and had to think through what do we want to pull together as partners, how does it look like? So the design of the program was participatory, it was inclusive. We had a very big theory of change that actually I think was on 2 walls, and then had to be wrapped up and kept for the future, and will be handed over to you after this process, because we still have it somewhere. And then from this theory of change, we had a very clear domains of where we're contributing to change, which Ramadan, the M&E monitoring, evaluation, and learning manager at UONET has shared on behalf of the male teams of the 4 partners. And so male was weaved into the design. And actually for us as Robert Bosch, we felt that for the assessment, for the pilot, the male function was very heavy, because we felt that there was a lot that required you to pick indicators. So there was that back and forth with us and yourselves to say, you know what, we need to allow the program to take root without us worrying so much about a complex monitoring, evaluation, and learning system. But I think that was a best practice that will inform the wider program. And then also another thing that we need to indicate around program design is that the design of the program created a very clear structure. The structure of the program had CEOs or heads of these institutions, although these were not connected. These were a bit disconnected from the program, because they handed over their power and a lot of the operations to their teams, who they were named themselves the project leads, the program leads. And these ones were actually the engine that drove the program. And then also we had each organization nominated a team of 3 people to be part of the project management team. We had the program lead, we had the finance lead, and also monitoring, evaluation, and learning or communications. So we had different teams that are working on specific roles. And for this particular meeting, each of these teams has put together what they felt should be part of their presentation. The gaps that we identified in the program design were the following. First of all, we realized that the pilot was too broad. And as we're negotiating the grants, we kept on getting partners to say, are you sure all this will be done in 50,000 euro? We think we need to be realistic. So that is part of the learning in terms of us being realistic. And I know this is a huge conversation between funding partners and grantees. Sometimes grantees have such huge expectations of very little money. So one of that is something that as we go into the main program, we need to think through, because also working in the public sector, it has a way in which it shifts how you're used to working, especially if you're coming in from the NGO sector, in terms of who you need to work with, in terms of streamlining issues like per diems, in terms of who should be in the meeting. For instance, doing a training for 30 people, you will end up paying 50 people because they're drivers. There's so much complexity that the design was not thought through, that I think should inform the future. And then the second one was around leadership. In terms of our feedback, we believe this pilot was led very well, exceedingly well. We saw a level of leadership that was taken on by the various organs, but also commitment. Of course, the beginning was a bit complex because people were getting used to each other, they were testing each other out. But after the initial months, we saw a lot of moving as a team, but also leadership growing even within the organizations that participated. And in terms of coordination and communication, the program had designed to have a communication strategy, because the design of the program was that each of the organizations was running with a specific component. That has a challenge about breaking the communication. So the communication was actually one of the weak points within this program, where time and again, people will not even trust that if so-and-so is managing this component, my logo will appear in the right place or even in the right colors. So that is something that as we're moving into the future, we need to address ourselves moving forward. But it is also part of the process of team building, of coalition building, which is not only unique to WIPS, but is part of how coalitions operate and what we need to learn from ourselves. And then there was visibility and representation, with the WIPS having their own logo, which logo was developed in a very exciting way. We actually sat in the background, but we could see all that was happening. People said, we need to have all our colors in that WIPS logo. We need to have an eye that is like a woman. So that logo was also it was an event of its own. The creation of the logo was an event of its own, but really the branding, the whatever it is, having WIPS out there, it is operating, connecting to the websites and the social media platforms. So for that, I think for a 1-year pilot, you did very well in terms of branding and visibility and making people know that there's something called WIPS, and then have a conversation. And then the reporting on our part was spot on. Partners reported in good time. Of course, there will be the back and forth that happens in grant making and these such relationships. So we need to really congratulate you partners to making sure that we submit the reports and they arrive the narrative reports. One of the things that actually yesterday I was thinking, why did they write some of those things in those reports? Because some of these were so juicy, like the stories that the beneficiaries share. They were so juicy. I'm thinking this should have been like a small box in that report so that it gives a sense of this is what is happening. But this is a learning process, and probably maybe that had to make the final convening exciting. And then another one was around flexibility and innovation. This particular pilot happened in a very interesting timeline. Uganda was preparing for elections. Like we all know, electoral fevers create different dynamics, but also at the same time, COVID-19 came. And one of the things that this particular pilot taught us is that the partners that participated are flexible and innovative. They got back to us to say we had planned, because most partners had planned to go in the field, have these meetings with people, sit in conferences, in workshops, and meetings. But now with COVID, we had the regulations, we had the so they got back to us to say, instead of doing this way, this is the suggestion that we have. And I think that was very timely, because it allowed us to think and work differently, but also for them to invest in alternative forms of organizing and reaching out. Lastly, on my part, what do we need to pay attention to? Or the questions that we have for you. The first one is around the partnership. From the onset, it was very clear that there are some people who should have been part of WIPs who are not there. How do we make sure they're included? Who is included? Who is excluded? Who should be part of WIPs? But also, how can you effectively manage a consortium of so many people? Because at one point in time, I would see the struggle of people just learning how others work. The struggle of merging and fusing systems of operation. So how do we work around that in a way that doesn't spend so much energy on managing the relationship than running the program? So that is a question that you have. And then also, do you think in your view you had the good combination of partners? Do you think you can work with each other moving forward or not? That is a question that we have. And then who else do you think should be around this table? And I know two of the ones that were mentioned were around local governments, and then also the Ministry of Public Service. Who else do you think should be around the table for this powerful as you're rolling out into the future? And then this next area of paying attention to is redefining coordination arrangements. And Miriam mentioned that yesterday. We need to redefine coordination, because how WIPs were structured is that we were all in this together, but we had our own separate systems, financial systems, etc. So sometimes it meant that we had to work with 4 finance managers, 4 monitoring evaluation managers, 4 EDs, 4 project leads. How does it look like, for instance, for the bigger term, maybe the consortium? How do you want to look at the financial arrangements? Do you want it to be a principal recipient and then they sub-granting others or not? What are the pros and cons? What have you learned elsewhere? And what works, what doesn't work for you? But also some central functions like communications struggled because we didn't have that central hub that was holding the whole piece together. So monitoring, evaluation, and learning, we had UONET commit itself and its team to do the leadership on that. How does that look like as we're moving forward? How do we capture all those key learnings? How do we monitor the indicators in a more consistent way? But also, who does the fundraising function? In this particular WIPs, whatever it is, the fundraising function, go to us and Miriam. I and Miriam had to identify who else should give money to WIPs. And I think in the main program, it should be the other way around. As the WIPs partners, you have to continuously look for resourcing, because we have to make sure that because WIPs is so huge, we do not have that amount of money. But more importantly, with time, how do we make sure that WIPs becomes one of the bigger programs that government is investing in their own women in the public sector? That is actually one of the key areas that we looked at in the theory of change, that in the longer term is one of the results we want to see. And then lastly, of course, engaging with the power centers. The pilot did not try to shift the power relations within the public sector, but for the longer term, there has to be that shift in terms of what are the political commitments we're getting from the government itself regarding gender and the women that work within the public sector. So with that, I'd like to invite Miriam, if there's anything I've left out, and Frank, for you to share your views, and then we can hand back over to you. But it was really an exciting time for us being part of WIPs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Salome. I think that was extremely spot on, and yeah, I couldn't have done it as well as you did. Very, very good summary of all the points I think which are important also to me and actually beyond So thank you very much for that analysis. Maybe the only point I wanted to add, and maybe that's more a question, and this is also something which is also, as you know, in our future programs, this question will pop up again, and I'd love to hear a bit your reflection on that. Is for us, as we knew it was a pilot year, we tried to encourage as much as possible to kind of like, you know, let you just experiment and just kind of like try it out. And you know, it was the 1 year we did not expect and didn't want to put any pressure on you to deliver the results. And my question there was a bit, do you feel like you had that freedom to experiment? And we didn't know each other very well. I mean, with none of these organizations, you have worked with us before, so obviously you didn't know how the donor reacts, and every donor is a little bit different. And so maybe, you know, it was kind of a bit like, well, okay, I don't know if we can trust what she says. So that's maybe my question, you know, how did you feel about that? Did you feel like you had that leeway to experiment and just try out things, or were you just a bit hesitant as well because you simply didn't know these Germans with this funny name nobody or everybody's struggling to pronounce? So maybe that's one of the big questions I still hold. But Salome has actually really well summarized already all the points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salome and Miriam. That was very, very spot on, like Miriam said. Most of the questions for Salome were directed at all of us as a partnership, but also the development partners, looking at how we popularize this program in the sense that the government will be interested in investing in it further. But also Miriam would like to know from the partners, I think, whether we were comfortable dealing with them. For me, from my side, I think the partnership was rather fruitful because we had a lot of engagements, especially at the beginning. But let me not preempt what the partners want to say. Perhaps we can give an opportunity to the partners to respond to that. Isabella, are you there? Petwa? Ramadan? Any of the partners wants to respond to Miriam? Okay, I see Isabella is on. Yes, please.
Yes, responding to Miriam on if we were free to explore, and okay, so that's a little tricky. It's a yes and no situation, really. One, because as someone who took lead with FarmFort, I know that we had a lot of open conversations with the program team. That was Miriam and Yasmina, but also with Salome on the ground about the things that we wanted to do. But at times the exploration and creativity was capped by financial obligations, you know, especially in areas where you probably had locked padlocks and unlocked ones. And so that was also a new phenomenon, dealing with locked and unlocked padlocks. And so every time you wanted to do something, you'd be like, is this a locked padlock or is this an unlocked padlock? And so, yes, there was a lot of dreaming. And I know that if we are designing the next 5 years, there's a lot of things that we could probably have wanted to do that we did not do because of either grant obligations or padlock situations. But what I can say is that we had very open conversations with you, Miriam, Yasmina, and Salome about our wild dreams. Also, the wild dreams at times didn't take root because it was a pilot, and then also the realities of the pandemic. All in all, we had a lot of support to dream and dare with the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. That was wonderful. You reminded us of the padlocks. Okay, so do we have any other partner that wants to respond to that question? Perhaps as we allow other partners to reflect on Miriam's question, we can go straight to the feedback to the WIPS partners, the finance feedback. Then later we can have a discussion because we are going to have an open session where we'll be able to share all this that we want to share. Okay, so I will hand over to Bobby and Stefan.
It will be Bobby only. Stefan is away on leave.
Okay, thank you, Solomon. Bobby, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning again to everyone. I am going to give feedback basically in around 3 areas. One is to the partners generally, and then the second part is what I see that could actually help us improve in the general financial management process. But first, let me give just a general feedback that yes, there was a very clear understanding of the financial requirements. And I think this was made possible by the inception meeting that we had with the finance team. So they were able to ask critical questions right at the beginning, and then maybe because of the communications around financial management. The second part that is that the financial reporting template, it's an easy to use template. And I think there wasn't any challenge with using the template and filling in the required information. Apart from the fact that when it comes to scanning of the report, which I understand depending on the nature of the accounting system and the filing that you use, it's not a very easy thing to scan all the documentations in order, especially if you wait till the reporting period. So we've had some delays around that. But one of the major things that we found out was about the administration cost. I think by the review of the second quarter report, most of the partners had actually spent between 80 to almost 100% of the admin cost. And then you're asking yourself, what would then be the source of the admin cost in the subsequent quarters? And I think one of the issues there is that they still in different understanding of what would constitute the admin cost. Sometimes even costs that would necessarily fall under the program cost actually being set aside as admin cost. And this is for situations where people think other items, say for example, stationery cost, communication costs are general, and then definitely charge on the admin cost. And yet the cure for this would be that you should actually charge all program related costs, because there could be a problem with in distinction of what generally would be office support cost and then the program cost. I've just given you an example of say stationery, toner. You have a printer in office, you're doing printing work for program activities for training, using stationery for training, but probably maybe you are buying toner for the office and charging that on the admin cost. So you can see that you're actually doing a lot to do with the program cost, and then you charge. So I think that's one of the reasons why the administration budget got depleted a bit fast. So I think we just need to cost all program related costs within the program activities. if a program activity requires communication, then you will have to cost all the communication requirements, if there is a training, all the stationary requirements should actually fall under site, so that your admin cost basically has things like bank charges, you could pay utility bills, you could pay in a postage or courier service charge around that. So that's one of the analysis from the report. And then I already mentioned something about the scanning, the receipt listing and the scanning, which is a challenge if you have a big volume of data. So it's better you actually scan when you can, before you actually accumulate the whole load, for example, for a final report. The other, which is a bit general, was the disruption, of course, with the COVID situation, and then the lockdown where you needed information, offices locked, and then your outside office. That was a general problem that affected the whole timing, and it's a new thing that happened. So the learning is only that it can only help us to prepare for the future. Now that disruptions are with us, like the COVID situations, how do we as organizations build our systems so that we are able to continue to work remotely on even financial issues, because and the risk associated with this. What is the risk of carrying financial documents to your home and then working on site? So it's something we need to work for. Organizations that can try to digitize as much as possible. That would be the best way to go. But we just have to be aware of that risk and then prepare that even in such situations, we can still be able to provide financial support. The other, which I also saw that is general, and I think in any contracting, this should actually be discussed. I know the contract to the partners add fixed transport cost, transport refund cost, but then situation change over time that with the restrictions and about the SOPs, public transport were only required to operate at 50%. So in this case, buses, taxis had to actually double or at least increase their prices to make up for the other empty space of 50%. So when you find this already fixed in a contract without flexibility, and you already said, okay, from Gulu to Kampala, we are going to pay a refund of 50,000, and then because of such a situation, you then maybe going to the actual price moves to 70 or 80,000, then you will go through contract amendments. So maybe, I think that is, I don't know if it has to be in the contract or there should be some room of flexibility. And then I think because of the COVID disruption, most of the organizations had to replan their activities and actually change the mode. So where there were trainings and certain trainings, so there were like budget shifts from one activity to the other. But I think this was made possible because of the communication and coordination between Miriam, Stefan, and myself. So on the overall, I think the reporting was okay. We can only coordinate better and work as a team for the reporting period to be able to actually deal with some of the situation. And then when it comes to the budgeting, like I think Solomon just mentioned that, reflecting the true cost. If you are planning for a training, what is the realistic cost and the cost items that you would charge? that you are not affected after you've received the money. So if you said 50,000 euros is what you needed for such a huge piece of work, is that realistic? Or we can only deal with nearly true figures so that we are not held midway the implementation, then we are not talking of a potential budget line over expenditure or replanning to move expenditure from one point to the other. So that's basically what I would say in terms of the financial management feedback from my side. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Bobby gave us the overview of the finance feedback. Do we have any comments from any of the partners, especially our finance officers? The forward finance officer is here with us, Elizabeth Atim. I see Geoffrey Owo, you have something to say? Okay, do we have any comments from the partners regarding the finance feedback? Because we are running a little bit behind schedule. We are 13 minutes behind schedule. So if there are no comments, since we are going to have a very interactive session, the next session with Jacqueline Asimwe, I would like us to swiftly move into that session, which is about envisioning the 5 years of the main WIPS program. So as several partners have said, as several speakers have mentioned, this was just a pilot carved out of a 5-year program. So we still have 4 years left onto the program. And therefore, we would want to envision this future of the program, what it should look like. And you remember in Solome's presentation, she gave us a bit of guidance on the kind of things that we should be looking out for. But also the learning questions, Rama mentioned that not everything was actually achieved that we set out to do. So all that we lump up and shape the next discussion. So Jacqueline Asimwe, CEO of Civisource Africa, you're most welcome to take over this open discussion.
Oh, so Elizabeth, and members, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
You know, when you get to the classroom and what you thought you were going to do is very different from what you're being asked to do. So that is the moment I am having right now. So, so what I'm going to do, Liz, with your permission.
Yes.
Because I assumed I was helping us think through what we might consider, reconsider, tweak. And so I had a few proposals, and then I will hand to you to help us lead the general discussion, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yes, perhaps I will ask Bella to chip in at that point.
Yes, and I did call Bella yesterday to explain my part of my confusion, but without biasing anyone, let me also share my screen so that I can share my presentation, and then I'll put on my video. I know that I have to. Okay, and then oops, where is the video? Oh no. Where is video? Okay, there it is. So good morning, everybody. I hope you can see me clearly and hear me as well. Just confirm that you can, either with a wave or a something, just alert me that we are together. Okay, thank you. So it's very interesting. One, I was told that I was invited as an insider outsider. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jacqueline Asimwe. I lead the team at Civisource Africa. Civisource Africa is does many things, but one of the things that we are passionate absolutely about is leadership, is local philanthropy. We do part grant making, you know, we're in all sorts of spaces, and we define ourselves as the intersection between philanthropy and civil society. And a lot of the team members at Civil Source have worked in various shades across civil society. So when we were interacting with WIPs, we were supporting the partners with the finance side, and Bobby has just shared his bit. But I also come to this space as a person who has been in the women's rights movement for the longest time. I believe actually since I was in law school, because that's when we got introduced to FIDA Uganda. That's when I started my journey of trying to understand women's rights, women's programming, women's advancement, gender equality, all those things. And so it was beautiful to see that that WIPs emerge. And I know, was involved in some of the conversations in the launch. I think I also attended the annual partners meeting, I believe last year in Hotel Africana, co-emceed with one of the partners. So I've been in and out in that sense. And so listening in yesterday, listening in today to the questions, to our theory of change, we wanted to do big things. And anyone must doing this work, right? I think we need the big, bold visions. Otherwise, we cannot do this work. It's the fire in our belly. It's the wind beneath our wing. That's what keeps us going. And so it's okay, I believe, to keep the big, bold vision, but also doing development work requires that then you understand moment by moment, year by year, quarter by quarter, what the reality is. And I think given to yesterday and today, I've heard a bit of that reality. Now, one of the blessings that I wanted to share that emerged out of this process was for us as CivSource. We do a leaders training, a leaders retreat called the Experience Retreat. And actually our very last retreat before the lockdown, I can find the thing that turns the thing, was with women in public service. And part of the way we got to them was through the partners of WIPs. And so we literally rode on the inroads that the WIPs partners have made. And it combined, I might need tech help. Okay, let me see if I press yes. There it is. So that is the group that we went on a retreat with. And our retreats center wellness. They look at the embodied leader. How can I lead myself well so that I am able to lead in the space that I am leading? And the 3-day retreat centers on how the leader connects with themselves and deals with the things that they carry. Because we know as we lead, we often carry these things into the spaces that we lead. But this is definitely a blessing from this, from WIPs. So imagine if we hadn't even been able to attend this meeting, you would never have known that part of the work that you have done has also enabled others, opened their eyes to the possibility of working with women in public service, opened our eyes to how to interact with them. We actually made a presentation before the EOC about our retreats. And it was through them that we also asked, who do you think would benefit from these retreats? And we, like I said, we also asked the other partners of WIP. So I applaud the program. Now, as I think of the next 5 years, and I'll do this quickly so that we have an open conversation. For those of us who wear glasses, and I know Salome, Penny, and many others, myself included, every once in a while, you have to adjust your lens. You have to adjust your lens. Otherwise, it's no longer clear. You can no longer see clearly. And when you can't see clearly, you can't do clearly. And so I think after this 1 year of the pilot phase, it's our moment to adjust the lens. What do we need to tweak? And you know, is it that the frame is no longer in vogue, so we need a better one? Is it that the lens technology has improved, and so we need new ones to see sharper and clearer? So what is the lens through which we see both the past and then into the future? And I have about 7 Ds that I'd like us to consider as we think towards the future. A lot of this work that we're talking about is disrupting the status quo. And given what I heard yesterday and part of what I've heard today, there were some things that we had to disrupt, or there are still things that we continuously have to disrupt because the work is not yet done. And part of it is the old ways of working that do not advance gender equality, and also customs, cultures that work against us. But what is it, as we look forward and as we look back, what did we disrupt and what do we have to continuously disrupt, both in our relationship with women in public sector, in our relationship amongst ourselves, the women's rights movement, and the women who we interact with in spaces of decision making? What do we have to disrupt amongst ourselves as partners and a funder? Because the relationships are triangular, right? So we're not only looking forward, we're looking at all the points, right? So what are the things that we have to disrupt? One of the things that I heard Salome talk about, and I think which we don't pay enough attention to, especially when you're going to work in and with a new space, is the value of relationship building. I think we often jump to activities without really deepening relationship. And so I was even asking some of the assumptions we made when we thought they don't know and we know, so we are the ones to train. They lack you know, the capacity to do gender things, so we are the ones going to, you know, that kind of what was the basis of those assumptions, and how can a program that is founded on relationship building do better, do different? Or having built some of those relationships, and relationships is beyond come and attend my workshop, let me come and see you in your office. What does relationship building as a foundation and as a disruptor of old ways of working look like? And how can we truly first set the right foundation? Because if the foundation is not right, the building will collapse. So relationships, and what does it look from a funding point to invest in relationship building? Not as we don't know and you know, so we are coming to help you know. No, we're walking on an equal footing towards a journey together. So what do we need to disrupt? A lot of this work is also about dismantling. And we also know dismantling doesn't take a day, because building doesn't take a day, or the thing that we're trying to dismantle did not take 1 day to build. So if we are to dismantle systems of oppression and discrimination, systems of inequality, and systems that perpetuate stereotypes, because some of the questions we ask ourselves is, what are the things that hinder women in public service doing the things that advance themselves or advance gender equality? And part of that requires dismantling. And so what are the tactics? What are the tools? What are the ways of dismantling a system? What does systems dismantling look like? And this is not work that can be done, of course, we know, in a year. Like I said, I've been in this women's rights work for since 1990-ish, 91-ish, and we still haven't. And moreover, we currently ride on the shoulders of those that have come before us, the Joyce Mpangas, the Rhoda Kalemas. They too were trying to disrupt. We're also going to bequeath to the next generation things they will have to disrupt. So when we think of dismantling, what does that look like given COVID, given the type of governance we have, given the type of budgets that our parliaments pass, given the types of leaders that we have and the demographics that we all know about, what does it look like to dismantle? The other that I heard and that we alluded to both yesterday and today is the continuation of the demanding. We must continue to demand rights and access to justice, implementation of already existing progressive laws and policies, because they are there. So how do we continuously put in place that demand? I heard Rama today talk about accountability. What are those systems in place where we require, demand, and accountability for advancement of gender equality? And also, I think that I heard yesterday also was workplaces that work for women in the public sector. We've talked about sexual harassment, we've talked about promotions, we've talked about advancement in career, we've talked about the leadership structures and what those look like. So, or even embracing new technology and what that means for women in the public sector, making the workplaces truly family friendly and gender friendly so that women are not always pressed against the wall to choose one, their gender roles and their career advancement, and you're always put in that hard place. How do we ensure that we continuously demand for a space that works? The other D is deploy, and I had this again yesterday and today. What skills, networks, expertise, knowledge, and creativity, something that Miriam was asking about today. How do we deploy it in service of the things that we want to advance in WIPs? And how do we even aggregate it? If we sit down and say the 4 partners and the institutions that we want to work with, this is the aggregate of the skills, of the vast networks, of the expertise, knowledge. I'm sure if we had understood that and then built on that, because it's already there. So what are we building upon in order to advance, to dismantle, to disrupt? So how can we better understand what we have so that we can deploy it in the best way possible? Again, we've talked about diversity. Yes, we always know and we say these things, women are not homogeneous, but every time we do programming, unfortunately, we fall back to this. So how do we ensure inclusivity, diversity, equity? How do we maximize our diversity? Today, Salome asked, and I was like, maybe she even read my presentation today, but who is at the table and who is not at the table, who is not yet listened to in public service? Who are those women at the periphery who we don't see and yet who have capacity, capability, expertise, knowledge to advance gender equality? So how can we use a better diversity lens going forward? Develop, and we talked about capacity, learning, training, because it's ongoing. We always have to keep growing. So what are those things that we must always be learning and relearning as we do this work? And finally, documentation. We've talked about it, and it's very clear that we must do it. I think what I'm inviting us to ask ourselves is, what narrative do we want to shape? Because that will determine the language we use, the stories we use, the pictures we use, the way we communicate, the means of communication. What is the narrative? What narrative are we disrupting, dismantling, displaying about women, and what change happens when women lead? So those were the Ds that I thought of. And Elizabeth, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much, Jackie. On behalf of the participants, allow me to clap. That clap is on behalf of the participants, because you took us very well through the 6 Ds. Were they 6? 7 Ds. Disrupt, dismantle, demand, diversity, develop, and then document. So right now, we are going to have an open discussion around the 7 Ds, but also looking at the questions that we have on our program. So the first question is around a discussion on the partner plans of rolling out the main program, and that is visions of the future. And I think Jackie has done very well to trigger our thoughts on that. How do we envision this future, given the context, given all these other things that she has talked about? But then we also need to think through the sectors or the scope. What sectors should be included? You know, the issue of ensuring that we leave no one behind, Agenda 2030. How do we ensure that we do not leave anyone behind? And then the geographical location, in which districts we want to go to, the resourcing, where can the funding be secured, the partnerships. I think Salome also spoke to this, who else should be part of this partnership, and then the mode of partnership. So right now, I invite especially our development partners, if you have a comment on all that has been shared or how you think we should actually move this program forward, now is the time. Salome, do you want to say something?
No, I don't want to say something. I'm actually excited that Jackie has challenged us and tickled us. So I look forward to hearing what, as partners, we are thinking through.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie.
Welcome, Salome. Welcome, welcome.
All right, thank you very much. So we have partners with us. We also have development partners. We have people that were part of the implementation of this project, WIPS. So please, let's have a discussion around these issues. I do not see any hands. Any reflections from what Jackie, Salome, we've had a lot of talking from the partners, CivSource. So now is the time for interaction, and please, 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 let's talk, let's discuss. Bella, are you back in the room?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm finally back in the room.
You're most welcome back. Do you have a comment?
No, I missed, I think I missed the whole of Jackie's session except for the opening.
Oh, so sorry about that.
But I know that as I spoke to her yesterday, we talked about looking through top level envisioning. So one of the things that, so part of the things in my mind is one that, yes, we had a lot of conversation yesterday about the need for WIPs, but is the need something that is ingrained, for example, in our aspirations as institutions, even as we begin to envision the future? Two is the need a commitment that we as partners are willing to make? Because if we are not able to answer those three questions, I mean those two questions, as a consortium, then I believe that we plan in vain. And at the point that I dropped off, I had seen that Jackie had put glasses on the screen. I didn't hear anything after the glasses, but for me, I think those are two questions that we would need to interrogate deeply, even before we get into the detail of of the sectors we want to go into, the locations we want to go into, and the partnership models that we would wish to pursue.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Perhaps just to say that as Forward, we are very committed to this process, and working with women in the public sector is something that we are very excited about, because it feeds into one of our core programs around women and leadership. So for a long time, Forward has been doing work with women in politics, and doing all these capacity building engagements, identifying people with leadership potential, and helping them realize their leadership aspirations. But then we had never really ventured into women in the public sector. So for us, it is an area of learning. And as we shared yesterday, the fact that we were able to register some positive results in such a short time, was a clear indicator that this is a direction we should be taking, but also the fact that we need to build or strengthen solidarity across the sectors, not just women in politics alone, and because we all seem to agree that we needed a united women's movement, not just looking at women in politics or women in this other sector. So I think this takes us to the right direction, and we are excited and very committed to the process as Forum for Women in Democracy. So perhaps we can hear from the other partners. EOC, Wonet.
Yes, thank you so much, Elizabeth. For EOC, I want to say we are very, very committed, but not only committed. Maybe I bring it in another perspective to make the argument a little bit stronger, that in reference to our report on the status of women, after we undertook a research in 2018, we realized that one of the big findings of the research was that women in the public sector at the entry level, there are so many women entering the public sector, but stagnated when it comes to promotions and also protection on how they should deliver the day-to-day responsibilities and also grow in career. It fits into our mandate. It's our obligation that we redress all forms of discrimination and marginalization. And women not rising, entering the public sector and not growing in career is some form of marginalization and also discrimination of a certain form and level that we need really to work hard to redress, so that women, as they enter the public sector, they also grow and also have the spaces and the rights to, to make choices and to be in leadership positions and make decisions for their well-being and career growth as well. So for EOC, we can say that we are still on steps on to see that the Women in Public Sector project goes on for the next 5 years as planned. And if we want to see what will be the change at the end of the day, we want to see the women solidarity, the women's voice, the women movement vibrant in the public sector. That came out yesterday, that in the CSO arena, the women movement is very vibrant, but when it comes to the public sector, women are working in isolation. Women are not supporting others to grow. Women are not mentoring the young women that are entering the public sector. There is a lot of violation of rights against women in the public sector, and so many things that came out yesterday. So as EOC, we need to double or triple our efforts to make that these spaces are gender responsive. We need to publicize the laws or popularize them so that people out there get to know. It was so surprising that when we interacted with the women in the public sector, so much came out in terms of them not being knowledgeable about the laws under policies and guidelines that protect them. This one, we need to work a little bit hard to ensure that women know what is in place to safeguard their spaces so that they proactively engage themselves and work towards their emancipation and also taking up leadership positions in the public sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Petra. I think Petra retaliates the need for a women's movement that cuts across the sectors, because much as we have a vibrant one in the CSO sector, we need to find a meeting point for these, different movements, such that we have a stronger, unified voice on these issues that we are trying to disrupt, dismantle, and demand or do our advocacy around women's rights. So, who on it?
Elizabeth, Rita here.
Yes, please. You're welcome, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for those reflections. I think the experience we've had in terms of implementation of this particular project, if we had the opportunity to run it for a longer time, it's one of those projects probably, or programs, that would make a lot of meaning in terms of development, but also the method of development financing. Jackie talked about when we say we are going to build capacity, whose capacity are you building? On what assumptions? Many times we say we are going to build their capacities on the assumption that they don't have those capacities, whether it is at the individual, collective, or institutional. Now, I know Jackie knows this very well. The financing for development approach does not allow that type of programming. It's more of ticking boxes. And at times it's even worse. You are directed what to do or what that fund can do. There is no flexibility of reflection, learning, relearning, and unlearning. However, with the WIPS project, however short it was, I realized there was a level of flexibility. And Solomon said that most of us, the leaders, had powerful delegation that were running this project. And indeed, they did well. But I was one of those who followed very closely. There was a lot of, you can change, you can have time, you can do this. And I was like, okay, this seems to be really what we need to be doing. And for me, this pilot is not just of the good successes or outcomes we've heard about, but we need to pick the lessons in terms of the methodology of its running, the approach that has been used, I think there's the value system. I don't know whether it's Robert Bosch or it's just Solomon who knows us and who's been into these things so much that she knows how to work with partners and what not to do, what to do when. But there was something for me that was different. And that different thing was a good one. So how we engage in our development work is changing a lot of things. Both the relationship on our side and the development partners, and how programs are run, whether it is actually meant to holistically empower people, or we are ticking boxes, or we're just doing jobs. Is it transformative on either side? Are the relationships mutually reinforcing and beneficial to both partners? These are critical questions we must ask. It's not just about receiving money and running projects. There must be growth and meaningful growth at that. So for me, just to say that this particular project has took me back to the ideal, what development financing should be, what partnership should be, and what programming should be, where you're able to consult the target group, where you're able to change strategy based on what they think, what they say, or what you've learned. And so that programs and projects are not cast in stone. For me, that has been the biggest lesson. And I want to thank Robert Bosch for that approach. It was our first time working with them. And if that is their value system, I think they're a worthy partner. And of course, my colleague Solomon for the highest level of professionalism displayed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. I think Rita has helped us reflect on the general modalities that were applied throughout the project. Thank you very much. Any other partner wants to say something? Sanyu? Sanyu, I see that your hand is up.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think that Rita has kind of picked what I wanted to say, so I will not repeat that. I just want to say that from Salome's presentation and then Jackie's very beautiful summary of what we must envision, I've been thinking about sailing. I feel like we've been on water. We've been sailing for a year, and it's time to adjust the sails. The winds have blown, and we did some readjustments on the sails, and it's about time we readjusted yet again. Some of these readjustments cause disruptions, like Jackie said, and most of these disruptions will not be comfortable. Are we ready to have those conversations about the disruptions that must happen? Disruptions in terms of whether, because it's one thing to have enthusiasm to do the work, it's one thing to bank all these wins that we have. Banked over the 1 year, even within us, to shore and to the lake, off of the boat to get sailing smoothly for us to get on shore. What are the so the issue of inclusion and diversity, the question on inclusion and diversity, who do we need to bring on board? Who do we need to see in this space? The issue about creating conducive and safe environments for women in public service. Are we in ourselves a safe and conducive space to work? I think we must have certain questions answered for ourselves as partners. And as we readjust the sails, we need to also reconsider, readjust, reconstruct, reimagine what the Women in Public Sector program must look like, what we want it to look like, what they need us to have it look like, so that we can sail smoothly and we can sail without having trouble as we get along. Because the disruptions at sea are usually many. This time it was COVID-19. Maybe next year it might be something bigger or smaller, or the other years it might be something else. Are we ready? Are we ready? I like Jackie's last slide on communication on storytelling. I don't think it was communication before I murder her presentation. It was about
documentation. Yes.
Sorry, yes, narratives, stories, increasing visibility, and the change that happens when women lead. As partners and as a consortium, we all have different storytelling techniques and different storytelling angles that we approach storytelling and documentation. What is the thing that brings all our documentation together so that it is a win for WIPS and not a win for Forward, a win for UONET, a win for FarmFort alone? And so for me, those synergies, those relationships that were alluded to, how do we harness those? How do we put some honey to galvanize them to work for WIPS beyond our small organizations? Okay, our big organization. My organization is still small, so forgive me if I've called yours small. Yeah, that's my reflection.
Thank you very much, Sanyu, for that wonderful reflection. Any other reflections?
Liz?
Yes.
From my side, one of the things that that we probably, as a whole, did not, I'm not sure how to put this, but maybe that we did not think on was a group clause in terms of where do we go forward from WIPS away from the individual sessions that we had with beneficiaries, because that would have given us data to be able to craft a direction in which a clear direction away from individual trainings and individual meetings and things like group circles. And so as a commitment, at least from FarmFort, because we are committed to taking this forward, I think one of the things that we will do is just get our beneficiaries together and try to have an envisioning process with them about what the 5 years could look like within the context of the country document. And that is something that we can commit to doing and commit to sharing on. Of course, in terms of scaling up, as an institution, yesterday I had reported that with support from Urgent Action Fund, we managed to scale up on work around just specifically women in sports. And of course, that was still done within the context of the country document. And maybe another thing that we should do away from this convening, post this convening, looking at the next 5 years, is that we, the WIPS leaders, need to sit down and look at how that country document fits within the context of our programming and work out a roadmap that then is able to give us the details around issues of scope, around issues of timeline, because Jackie has triggered our minds. I know that it would have been totally impossible to have been able to answer those questions within the 1 hour timeline. But I believe that as leads, we can be able to respond to those and then be able to carry on the mantle of fundraising from Salome and Miriam, who have been doing it. I know that they are still very committed to helping us, but it's probably a task that we need to actively take on ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella, for those commitments and reflections. I think it is very clear. I'm not seeing any other hand up, so I'm going to wrap up this. So I think it is very clear from all submissions that we need to reflect further, deeper, especially on Jackie's presentation, but also looking at what we're able to achieve in the 1 year. We need to reflect together as partners. So we need that space for us to come together, reflect, and see how to actually envision this while factoring in the feedback that we get from our beneficiaries. Because remember, we talked about inclusion before. So we shouldn't sit in this one space and assume to know it all, but we should find methodologies or avenues of involving our beneficiaries such that they are able to shape the agenda or the direction that we should be taking. So I think with that, we will need another space to agree on how we get this process running and when we actually get it running. But also the other big takeaway from this discussion is that we need to document, because the last D was about documentation. From yesterday's sharing, it was very clear that we all realized very wonderful achievements in such a short time. But how have we documented them to actually market them to the other development partners? Because this could actually be a starting point for us to attract funding. We talked about the diminishing donor space or the donor fatigue that is out there. How do we package it differently? How do we package this in a sense that, you know, it attracts funding both from the development partners, but even from government? Because Solomon talked about us making this program attractive to government such that they commit to prioritizing WIPs for the next 5 years or even beyond. So this is really homework for all of us as partners. And I would like to actually usher us into the next session with that, which is about defining key agreed next steps. And that is Solomon. We've hinted a little about them, but Solomon will help us, you know, concretize what we agree on as our next steps. Thank you. Solomon, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much for taking us through that session. As we are winding up that session, I'd like to call upon, I know we have people on this call that we invited purposely because they have an inside-outsider look, but also because they're funding partners, they're partners that are in the sector. For them, if they have a word or two following up, now that you've listened to it all, I know you have questions. Some of you have questions that you've placed in the chat. Others still have questions that are in your notebooks. At least I know we have DGF is on the call. We have both Fiona and Doreen. We also have Horizon is on the call. We also have, who else is on the call that is from the funding partners? Please, if you have anything to share with us here, your reflections, you've had it all, what are your reflections? I'm opening the space now before we move on into the next action. Doreen? You had a number of comments that you're sharing in the chat. Can you start with those ones? Doreen, are you there?
Yes, Salome, I'm there. Good morning, everyone.
Morning to you.
Yeah, thank you. I've shared something with you in the chat, so you can use that.
Okay. So Doreen shared in the chat to say that they have personal reflections. Of course, let's not attach those reflections to DGF as the institution. She wanted to know who are the allies in the public sector that we're working with under WIPs. And then also what are the alternatives of doing things differently? Is also another reflection that they had. And then what are the approaches to be used that suit the target, that is women in the public sector? Now that we've shared some of the approaches, but also what worked and what didn't work out. And then I think I've shared what Doreen shared in the chat. I think, Doreen, is there anything I've left out? And they say that it's a very good conversation. For now, they are listening in. I think those are the comments that Doreen shared. Okay. So we'll have, I know, Norbert, Fiona, before Doreen, because DGF had 2 reps from the 2 spheres.
Yes, thank you very much. I am Norbert Luigi Banio. I work for Horizon 3000 and as a program coordinator, but also the gender focal person for the organization. And it's such a special honor to be part of this great event. And I have been following the discussions. I'm impressed by the uniqueness of the area that you have chosen to work in. Because I think that in most cases, when we look at issues of, we tend to isolate people who are in public spaces with the assumption that everything is going on well for them. And a lot of focus tends to rather be at the community level, failing to recognize that women in public spaces, if even empowered better, can open greater spaces and opportunities for those that are the grassroots level. So I find it a unique area that really is worth the effort and should be concentrated on. I would also re-echo certain points that already sounded so popular and equally re-echoed by other people in terms of respect for partnerships and issues of participation on the basis of what are we offering and what makes us think that we should be the ones doing all of it? What do other people know? And I come from an agricultural background, and one of the key principles in rural extension is to start from where people have, to be able to go to communities and know what do they have. And
No, but I think we've lost you a bit.
from where they are, how can they rise participate in determining, and not can we add on, and what can we also learn from them? And that really gives greater value and respect for partnerships. And along the way, we also later recognize, oh, there was actually something we didn't know. And in promoting that respect, then it helps us build these relationships that someone was talking about. And that going forward, people are more willing to share their knowledge, and we even develop much bigger projects. So in conclusion, I want to thank all of you for the invitation, and I look forward to following this conversation further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Norbert, and also requiring us to really value local knowledge and also learning from the women in the public sector themselves. Fiona is coming next. We had on the call Thomas from the EU in Uganda. I don't know whether Thomas is.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Fiona.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Salome. I am very, very excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as well. First and foremost, this has been quite a learning experience for me, but also I think for DGF, because this is something that we would have to have a conversation about internally. Two things though, most of the issues were addressed. I really had some questions, but in your submission, Salome, but also as well as the partners, some of the questions I had were addressed. In terms of partnership, I am wondering, whether the partners under Bosch had a working relationship before, because at the DGF, I'm in charge of the portfolio on government responsiveness and accountability. And I was very excited to hear that Equal Opportunities Commission is part of this consortium. I am wondering if there was a working relationship before, because what I'm hearing is a lot of success, even with the pilot. And so I'm wondering how this was done. Was there a relationship before? Did it just start as a result of the grant, the Robert Bosch grant? And if it started as a result of the grant, how is it possible that it's been quite a success in just under a year, but also the year that we've been facing a lot of COVID and lockdown? My other question is on is pretty much touching a little bit on what Jackie shared in her presentation regarding learning. I know that as civil society, one of our biggest challenges is documentation and learning. I'm wondering how we would be able to have a conversation on making sure that this project highlights its successes registered, because had I not been part of this this meeting or this gathering, I don't think that I would have known the depth of the success that the project has been able to achieve. And so I'm wondering how this can also spill over into the other partnerships that we might have going forward, but also how we can encourage learning across the board. But over and above, I have been impressed with the discussion. I have been impressed with the project. I have been impressed with the consortium and the partners itself. And I have been very excited to be part of this call because I have learned a lot. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Do we still have, is Thomas still on the call? Thomas from the EU in Uganda. Okay. Frank from Robert Bosch, do you have anything to say? Okay, so partners, we have questions that have been raised by both Doreen and Fiona, and there were comments that Norbert shared with us. Does any one of us would like to respond? Yes, Petwa, you would like to respond to the questions that have been raised, Petwa?
Thank you so much, Salome. I'm responding to Fiona, some of the questions that Fiona raised, and particularly one question that was eye-catching or ear-catching, and that was, have we previously been in a relationship with the partners that we have been working with under the WIPS project? What exactly made it the way it is now? What shaped the success is what I wanted to respond to. This is very, very amazing that we were not previously in partnership, but we came together at a point that we recognized or we realized that there was a gap. So many interventions had been made, but this was an area that has not been tackled. And we all had the interest, that is the passion, which I think was the biggest driving factor that we were driving towards a common goal. And then what made it work out in the shortest time possible, and we have achieved high success, is that we had the frequent learning and reflection meetings. These ones kept us so close to realize or to rethink of what are we doing right? What are the gaps? What do we need to improve? Are we moving together? We were very, very cognizant that we should not disconnect. All the times we knew we had obligations to support each other in order to achieve as a partnership. Also, what was amazing in the partnership is that each one of us was driving in a different direction, or if I could put it this way, that we were all coming to Kampala, but through different roads. But all we wanted is to get to a common point. And how it worked is that we all had strength and also learning options that CSO's perspective had to learn from the government perspective. And what we did well is that we were always on our toes to mitigate the working culture shocks. For example, the bureaucracy in government. You would hear calls coming from PEMFOT, from ONET, from FODI, telling Petra, please be mindful. This is new to us. This is not how we have been working. And then I came in to mitigate. What was amazing, a mountain became a soft landing for them. And also as a government institution, we had some working culture shock on how CSOs work, the robust speed, the way they were, leaving us behind, and we realized they are halfway the program and we are just into bureaucracy, starting, opening an account is taking us 2 months, and then getting to our stakeholders, the beneficiaries, and then how do we do it? So we learned from each other so much, and these differences were our strength. How do we support? How do we keep in connection? How do we always keep in the same direction so that nobody is left behind, is what we consider as the greatest strength that has made us achieve in 1 year. That's what I wanted to submit, Solomon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything left there, or we move on to the next steps and actions? We had questions from Doreen regarding who the allies were in the public sector. Okay, so I think I should move us into the next steps. What have you agreed as the next steps? Defining the next steps. What would you like to do moving forward? Now that we've had it all for the last 2 days, how do you like to proceed? And this is an open conversation. Already I've noted here from the last 2 days and also today, there is actually a commitment from all the 4 partners that they'd like to continue with WIPS. And actually this, with the virtual meetings, people do not know how to show their emotions. Can we see the emoticons? Yesterday they showed us where the emoticons are. Can we see your emotions? Because partners are saying they're willing to move with, they're interested and committed to move. So let's see the hearts, the claps, the thumbprints, the hearts, everything. So that is the first next step, that there is a willingness to move, because people say we've picked a lot of learnings from the pilot, would like to move into the main program. Then there is also a lot in terms of methodology of working together, in terms of the culture of learning, in terms of the value systems, in terms of the reinforcing and beneficial partnerships that informs the. There's also an action around looking at the areas that Jackie's presentation has challenged us on. That is, how are those integrated into the program moving forward? There is also an action around revisiting the program document, because many things have changed between 2018 to 2021, 2019 to 2021, in line with the current context of the state of governance, of where women are located, but also of having a government that has very many women in the top positions that actually are supposed to make decisions. Not as many as we want to, but most of these have come in as politicians, but they are heading key sectors. In line with COVID-19 and the post-COVID world, in line with the state of organizing where we are as the women's movements, but also in line of the seed that WIPS has sown. And then also revisit the program document in terms of the scope. Where does WIPS want to invest itself in, the timelines, and then also sitting WIPS within our own organizations. So there's that next agreed step, that you can't run it as a project running parallel, and is not part of what your core business is within your strategy and the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. Another one is around partnerships and participation and strategic engagements, especially reaping more from partnerships, promoting respect, but also learning as a WIPS partners from the women, not coming on the WIPS table as the experts, but learning from the women in the public sector, because in one or the other, they've survived there. So there's ways in which they've known how they've survived, which ways can be harvested. Another one is around documentation and ongoing learning and documenting the successes, and then these are scaled up and used to inform the wider people outside this consortium. Is there anything else that I've left out? Anything I've left out? So apart from that, is there any next steps that you'd like to define that we need to capture? Any key next steps? What does silence mean?
Consent, but but I believe that part of the next step, Salome, that we had spoken about in the last session was a leads convening beyond this end of project review.
Leads, the program leads, eh? Isabella, the program leads or the organizational leads?
I can only commit to the program leads. Yeah, at least we can convene that.
Now that you also have the EDs on this call, Rita, are you also planning to convene? Is also that part of your conversation that you like to have? And Elizabeth is representing Patricia today. Is that something that you also like?
To convene?
Yes.
Salome, can you please come again?
So what we have here as one of the next steps is the leads convening, where the program leads for the program have committed to convene after this meeting. So I'm asking, are you as the CEOs and heads also planning to convene so that we capture it as a next step?
I believe it's instrumental for us to convene. And one thing I didn't say is that at UONET, we coordinate a number of consortiums, including a women's leadership consortium called the Women's Democracy Group, which this project actually directly falls under. And as I said yesterday, for us, working with women in the public sector was already part of our strategy. So without doubt, we definitely need to convene and see how we can ensure that this is part of our bigger programming.
So can we hear in terms of noting saying that the leads are going to convene and UONET is going to be charged with that convening?
Well, that has to be a democratic decision, but we don't
to
mind.
Remind others.
we wouldn't mind. Since we're already coordinating WDG. Mm-hmm.
Now, the three others are here. In terms of UONET, you're here, Comfort is here, Forward is represented by Elizabeth, and we see Commissioner Kamia on the call. Can we get an indication that you're happy to be convened by UONET, and then you defined as the leads how you want to move?
I think for us as Forward, we are happy to be convened by UONET. We've worked with UONET before. There was a question on whether we had worked with the partners before. We've worked with them in several consortia, so we are happy to be convened by them. And in terms of defining the modalities, I think that will happen later beyond this meeting.
Okay. Okay. Also, Comfort Penny writes that they're happy to be convened at UONET. So EOC, are you happy for UONET to convene us as the heads of these institutions to think through how you want to move ahead? or Sister? Is Sister on the call?
Yes, Sister and Commissioner Kamia are on. Now it's the big drums now that are Commissioner Kamia and Sister. Commissioner Julius.
Okay, so as we're waiting for us, let's go back. The program leads to convene. Are they going to be convened where? Who is convening them? Who would like to convene that meeting so that we are sure that we know who to follow up on?
I'm happy to do that. FAMFORT is happy to do that.
Okay.
For the program leads.
For the program leads, Ramadan, Petua, Sarah, and Rama, are you happy to be convened at FAMFORT?
Yes, for EOC, we are happy to do so. We have no problem.
Okay. Okay. Uonet, do you have a problem with going to the neighbors?
Not at all. We are fine. and Uonet's team, by the way, for the women's leadership is Julia Nalwoza. She's been quiet, but she's actually the one who is in charge of the women's leadership program. So you'll be seeing her more than Sarah, and with support from Rama for M&E.
Okay, thank you very much.
Julia Nalwoza and Hilda Nambatia.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So anything else that we've left out in terms of key next steps? And I know in these two convenings, they will enable us to really shape the how, because we've in principle agreed, yes, the principle is we want to move. So the how will be shaped further by this particular two convenings. And on our part as the Robert Bosch, we'll make sure that within the next few days, we get the summary of the report of this convening, because it also enables you to pick some of the issues to move with in these two convenings that you're going to have, as well as defining the next steps. So that is also an action on our part to share with you the meeting report or the summary of the report of the convening for the last 2 days. Okay, so, and also we are seeing in the chat, all the organizations are naming who's going to take leadership moving forward. Rita has indicated the team. Also Forward has indicated Peace Namayanja as the Women and Leadership Program. That is going to take lead on this. Then we have Isabella. So I think I've done my work very well to define for you the next steps. I'll now, and I've tried to save some of the 10 minutes, we've saved 6. So I'd like to hand over to Elizabeth and Isabella as our core facilitators for the last 2 days to pass us through the evaluation, and then we start moving towards the close.
Okay, so thank you very much, Solomon, for smoothly saying that through the key agreed actions after this. So we've been having a side chat with Isabella and have agreed that this is an evaluation that should be undertaken by an M&E person. So we have Claire Alinitwe, our M&E officer, that is going to take us quickly 5 minutes through how we evaluate our 2 days of engagement. Claire, you're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Hello.
Hi, Claire. How are you?
Fine, thank you. It's going to be a very quick one. Actually, 5 minutes are very many. We are going to evaluate our 2 days meeting or workshop. So I have designed 3 questions only, and I have posted, our communications person is going to post them to different emails of the participants so that it becomes easier for us to evaluate this meeting. So the questions are about what worked for you in this meeting, the 2 days meeting. And then the link, I'm going to post the link in the chat. Then we're also looking at if we had all the relevant stakeholders present, or if they were not there, we would also, we are giving a slot on you suggesting whom we should have invited, or whom we should have also included in this meeting. Then the last one is also suggesting any areas of improvement, that is, if you are not satisfied with the time, the content, and the participation of this meeting. I'm going to be sharing this link shortly. Elizabeth, please come and please take on. Let me share this thing quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. The link has already been posted in the chat by our comms officer, Joanne, has already posted the link. I hope you can see it. Please respond to those questions. There are just 3 of them to help us improve. Oh, okay. I see a message from Commissioner Kamia. I thought it was the link. So I think that we can do that quickly. How many minutes does it take? I'm being assured here that if you click on that link, you require just 2 minutes to actually make a response. Can we please do that quickly, 2 minutes? We value your feedback. Please give us feedback on how we can do better. I hope we can all see the link in the chat. Please do click on that link and give us your feedback. So before I invite Rita Achiru to do the closing remarks and goodbyes, I just want to thank you very much. You've been wonderful participants. And to remind us that Robert Bosch has taken care of our logistics. And for those of us that you'll be receiving data of 100,000 for day 2. So that will be handled by the Bosch Foundation, and it will be immediately after this meeting. But before we close, I see Miriam's hand is up. Miriam, is your hand up?
Yeah, sorry to quickly interrupt, because unfortunately Frank and myself, we have to leave because we have another meeting, and so we just quickly wanted to say goodbye, and as there was maybe a moment to quickly jump in before Rita says the last goodbyes, I just wanted to thank you, especially the team who was preparing and organizing this workshop, Solomon, the 4 programs leads, for all the efforts and taking up the challenge of doing all this online. Thanks for all playing along. I know this can be sometimes challenging, but thanks very much from our side of the Robert Bosch Foundation as well. And we wish you all the best of luck. And we're still there. We're still obviously approachable. So please feel free to reach out to us, and Solomon is still around as well. So thank you very much, and we say goodbye.
Thank you, Miriam. Bye-bye. Okay, so Miriam had to leave, and the Bosch team had to leave actually. So I already made the logistic announcement. Thank you, Salome. Thank you, the Bosch Foundation, for making this possible. So right now we are going to have Rita Achiru, Executive Director of UONET, doing the closing remarks and the goodbyes. Rita, you're most welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You failed to pronounce my name for a very long time. I'm Achiro, not Achiru.
My apologies, Rita Achiro.
All right, thank you. Colleagues and invited guests, thank you very much for attending for the last 2 days. I just want to say that as partners, we are really, really happy. This journey, as Salome said, started about 2.5 years ago. I remember a few of us sitting together, of course, Salome convening us, and trying to agree on what we can do differently and where we could do this differently in terms of women's leadership. We reached a consensus that working with women leaders in the public sector was the thing that we needed to do differently. I'm glad that we're able to achieve that. And this was really because we wanted to broaden the base for women's leadership and build a critical mass of women leaders across sectors and ensure that we are able to have women leaders who are not just occupying space, but who are gender sensitive and gender responsive. And with that, we hope we'll be able to build a movement. From our discussions since yesterday, it goes without doubt that we have definitely made inroads despite the short period of the project of 1 year. And we really, really want to pat ourselves on the back and a hand clap for all of you. One thing that we also really learned is that working together is very crucial for any success. And as I said earlier on, that as ONET, for us, that is our method of work. Being a network, we are a catalyst of working together. Where I sit and where my colleagues sit, we're just a secretariat. So we cannot implement, we cannot be everything. We are a catalyst of us working together. So we are happy that we are part of this, and the working together has continued to grow. And I know because of that, we have been able to reach, far and wide. As I close today, while we celebrate the achievements we've made over the past year, particularly for this project, the bigger tasks still lie ahead of us. Remember, this was just 1 year. It was in very few districts. It's something we're doing for the very first time. So the bigger challenge lies ahead of us. And this challenge that lies ahead of us also is being taken back by a number of challenges, with the latest kid on the block being COVID-19. And so some of these challenges that interfere with our work is part of the reflection we ought to do to ensure that our work runs smoothly. We need the partnership, we need innovations, we need trust building in the work that we do. We need to think of alternative ways of work, alternative ways of resource mobilization to ensure sustainability of the work we do together. Working together definitely makes us achieve bigger goals. And indeed, with the spirit of working together, as you've all noted in the last 2 days, the testimonies we've had, that we've been able to achieve a lot more than we would have done individually. So I'd like to thank all of you, first and foremost, the implementing partners, the Equal Opportunities Commission. We are very grateful as a government entity that you can work with civil society. Of course, you're not the first. We've worked with Ministry of Gender on a number of programs, joint programs for over 8 years in others. But working with the EOC is very, very important. And that's what development should be. Many times we're misperceived by a few people, not everybody in government, that civil society is anti-government. But I'm sure you have seen how useful civil society can be. But also, as civil society, we have seen how it is useful to work with government and government entities. Farm Fort, the colleagues from Farm Fort, thank you. The colleagues from Forum for Women in Democracy, thank you very much. And of course, my own team at ONET who put in everything. At one time, I think everybody was on this particular project. Rama, Flavia Ajok, who started the project and had to go for study leave. Thank you very much. Now Julian and Hilda, who have been supporting, they've been quiet in the background for the last 2 days, but they've been working along with Ramas and Sarah. Special thanks to our district partners and the target group. You had some of them yesterday, the testimonies. Thank you very much. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to work in those districts, facilitating our processes of ensuring we have quick MOUs, ensuring when we have activities, you're able to mobilize and be there on time. Thank you, and taking the project seriously. And a special way, I want to thank the men who were part of the project, took it seriously and learned a lot and are using the learnings. We want more men. Women's rights are human rights, then, and our struggles are men's struggles as well. So thank you for joining this struggle. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Robert Bosch and our technical person in country, Salome, for all the support, financial, technical, and hand-holding, the understanding. There are little things we overlook when we are running programs and projects. Relationships, these are small things that many of us overlook in running projects. But I'm telling you, they're very instrumental for the success of projects and working together. Thank you so much, Salome, for the work you've done. I know working with different groups is not easy. I'm sure you have also learned a lot working with a younger lot in our different organizations. To all our guests who have joined us for the last 2 days and those who joined us today, we would like to thank you for participating. I'm sure you've heard what we've been able to do, and we look forward to working with all of you in the nearest future. We will move this beyond the pilot project and do whatever it's within our means to ensure that we scale this up to another level. I want to wish all of you good health and may God bless you. For God and my country, have a very good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rita. I think now we're leaving. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Stay blessed.
Thanks, and a nice weekend.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye. The host asked me to end this. I gave it to
Bye.
Bye, Rama.
Starting to get to the business end. Almost 3/4 of the way through.